Hey, what's going on? It's Bebop here, and I am going to go over everything that you should have when you are going to do an M3. And this might be kind of a long video, but I'm going to try to get straight to the point. So let's start off with basic things, okay? We're going to look at which dungeons are running right now. We have Savage Divide. We have Ened or Enid, however you want to say it. And then we got Starstone. There it is. So if you were familiar with running M1s and M2s and you've ran a bunch and you know where to go on all the pulls and how to properly play, what your role is. Let's say if you're a tank, you know exactly what spots you need to go to, what pulls you need to do. If you're DPS, what archers you need to branch off and get while the tank's holding the mobs so the healer doesn't get killed. And if you're familiar with all that, you ran plenty of M2s and you're fully confident you're ready to step to an M3, all right, come on up. Let's start off here. In the M1s, you know, you basically just had this to worry about, the nature, mutation. In M2, they started throwing this at you, Mage Hunter, which is really going to attack any mages in the game, especially the healer. You're going to be running out of mana a lot. And then named enemies will drop suppressor zones, which you're familiar with in M2s. So M3s, let me just say this. And M1 and M2 are very similar. You don't even have to really ward pod to get through those. Very simple. M3 is the jump from M1 to M2 is basically, let's say, like an M1 to M2. And jump from M2 to what they call 3 is basically like like 10 or 11. Okay, it's a big jump from 2. Okay, I've seen a lot of people coming up from 2s thinking they know what's up and they just get smacked and they can't even get past the first boss. Happens, we've all been there. Not judging, just saying. Took me a long time to learn it. You will have to go in there. There will be a learning curve. Just expect it. So I'm trying to give you the best guide I can. Anyways, I'll ramble on. So right here, you're gonna come up on unstable. Players are inflicted with nature damage over time, with the time effect, or with the effect dealing 1.5% of their max HP worth damage every second for 10 seconds. Stacks up to 3 times. You cannot cleanse it by any means. And when you get 3 stacks, let's say you dodge 3 times, you get 3 dots on your back. And about 10 or so seconds later, or 15 seconds later, it will drop a pool of nature. Now, if everybody's rolling and dropping pools of nature on the tank, it can be a little bit of a problem, but tanks are usually full of con and should be good to go. So it shouldn't be that bad of an issue. Just watch out where you're dropping your stack sometimes. If you're picking up, rezzing people, or people are just getting up from being rezzed, last thing you want to do is drop a stack on them. But that's what you're going to have in this Savage mutation here. I ran it last night. It was really pretty simple. The last boss fight obviously is a problem for random groups to, to deal with, but, let's look at Starstone here. Okay. M1, you would just have the Void. M2, they start throwing Vampiric and Phalanx at you, which means enemies cast a shield that blocks any projectile, so a bow or hatchet being thrown or anything like that. The named enemies will block that. And Vampiric, enemies heal for 20-40% of the damage done that they do to you. So you would need anti-heal. Let's say Bile Bomb, Blunderbuss with Plague Strikes or Plague Disease. Any disease that you can put on the enemies from keeping them from healing up is what you would need. And then in the M3, they throw Weary at you and Blood Offering. So Weary is gonna apply to players in combat, slowing their movement by 30%, increasing all damage they take by 20%. So, and that's fun. And then Blood Offering, using abilities, applies a stack of offering, causing 4.5% of the health applied as void damage over the time of the player, stacking 3 times. So every time you use an ability, you're gonna get a dot on your back, draining your health, and then with the Weary slowing you down. It's really not that bad as it sounds. Starstone should be pretty easy this week. When it's Void, Starstone is probably the easiest to run when it's Void. So it's a really good week to run Starstone. Enid, not so, or Savage Divide, not so much. It's like medium hardness, I would say. Starstone would be easy. And then you go to Enid, which just looks like pure death. So in the one, you would have Hellfire to deal with, a flame, obviously. And then in the M2, you would have Festering and Slicers. So Festering, enemies that hit you apply a stack of disease, reducing your incoming healing by 2.5 to 5% per stack. And the big problem is Slicers. That's 30% base void damage when touched, on top of a lot of the enemies doing a lot of physical damage in there. That just sounds terrible. I'm probably going to stay away from it this week. Usually fire mutations for a Ned is so easy to, you know, get through, because the bosses, you want fire protection also. So, I mean, it's probably still, if you got a good group, somewhat easy to get through, but those slicers are just going to do hella damage. So you got silence in the Ned, so blowback fire using abilities depletes a global affliction. When your affliction is in depleted zone, it casts a silence spells on everybody. And once the affliction expires, the zones detonate, dealing 65% of max health as fire damage. That's when the silence zones start going away. That's when the fire comes in. Luckily, you will be fire jumped up, so shouldn't be too bad. But truncated, however you say that word. When silent zones are active, all players lose natural mana regeneration. Saying that silent zones grants 25 manas per 0.75. Effects cannot be cleansed by any players. So, not really a big deal, but the slicers are going to be a big deal, and the festering. So, I ran a need enough here in the last couple of weeks whenever it was around, and then Starstone ran that a lot too. So what I'm going to be doing is Savage only. I don't see myself doing the other two. I've done them so many times. Savage is my favorite dungeon in the game, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. Now, setting up my sets for Savage as DPS. Savage Divide, you want 2 sets, okay? Maybe 3, depending, but I have 2 sets set up, okay? One's going to be all nature protection to protect me from nature, with the amulet being nature protection, refreshing, and health. If I had one with empower and health, that'd be better. I have a spear. I'm going to go as main spear, enfeebling skewer, vicious, keenly jagged, and I have the great axe for the enfeebling maelstrom and trying to group up the enemies as best I can, which not too many spots in this dungeon, so we'll see how that goes. And I have Enchanted Ward basically on every piece. So when you get to this level at M3, I would suggest having Enchanted Ward on every piece. It's the most important perk of the game. No matter what M3 dungeon you're doing, Enchanted Ward, I would say always try to get on every piece. Right here, try to maximize your refreshing 4 out of 4 on both your sets if you can. Not always possible, but if you can. But Enchanted Ward, health refreshing is basically a BIS piece. And anytime you can get a perk that benefits your weapon, so anytime I perforate with a spear, I'm going to get some fortify. That's also what you want to look for. Here I have Enchanted Ward, refreshing, and health. Now, these attuned leather pants is what all DPS should be wearing. In my opinion, you get 10 attribute points to every attribute stat in your attribute tree. So that's going to help get you more damage and more survivability. I put health on these. And then I have Enchanted Ward, Bleeding Sweep, and health. So not only am I going to have the Bleeding Sweep from that perk, I'm going to have Keenly Jagged and the bleed from the skewer. So it's a lot of bleeds going on in this. It's really nice. I got the thrust damage ring, leeching, and hardy, and the empowering toast, fortifying toast, refreshing toast, which I'm probably going to put healthy toast on here instead of refreshing toast, because the refreshing toast is not really that good anymore. Have a good heart rune. Okay, now you want to try to divide it up. So you don't want everybody running vines, okay? If you have 5 vines in the group, it's not really too much of a benefit there. You want someone running what they call the kick, which is this firestorm, and you want the brutal, do the most damage, and then you want someone else running, let's say, rending vines, wherever they have those right here, that applies rend to the enemies. You want one maybe running brutal detonate, one running bile bomb. You want to spread them out so you're doing damage across the board, because they're not going to stack if everybody's using the same thing. Now, you running through the main dungeon, I always say keep plenty of coatings on you. Keep plenty of gems in case anybody in your group shows up without them, or in case maybe you need to change out a piece and you want to place another gem in there, keep Desert Sunrise on you, or if you prefer Powerful Incense, go ahead. Whatever food buffs, have plenty of them going into it. Have plenty of health potions because you're going to run through those really quickly. And if you have an earring with Healthy Toast on it, which I think is almost a must for the boss fights, that means I can drink a mana potion and get 15% of my base health also. And it's really quick motion to get that, not like chewing food. So regeneration serum I have on my boss sets because it's gonna be a lot better than the infused regeneration, which is 240 health, 70% of your, or 0.70% of your max health. So the regeneration serum was 400 of your health plus 1% of your max health and 5 stamina. So that's going to be a lot better. And I feel like in the boss fights, definitely you should have those. They're a little bit expensive, so I understand if you don't. But your boss set should be all opals just like this, okay? So when I put on this set, I'm going to be still going to have dots on your back in this mutation on the bosses, so you still need to account for that with nature protection. So I have 34.7% nature protection, everything else 20%, and that's going to give me enough protection and should be able to get through just fine. The last boss fights, it won't be easy. The first boss fight's pretty easy as long as you got people that have a base knowledge of what they're doing. If you don't know on the first boss how to do the pylons and then how to get in the circle, do not run an M3. Don't come there until you're ready. Okay, you need to learn how to work the pylons and get into the circles on whatever element that you destroy the pylon on. Another thing on the boss fights, what I would say, since they are a bit hard in Savage Divide, is go with Featherweight. And that way you can run 2 heavy pieces. As long as you're not sword and shield DPS, you can do this. I run a heavy headpiece, elemental aversion, chain of ward and health. Heavy hands, elemental aversion, and chain of ward and health. Then I have a chain of ward, refreshing, leeching shrapnel blast, because I might be using a blunderbuss at points, so I want to have the leeching shrapnel blast. And then I have fortify perforate and chain of ward and fire harnessing. So make sure you still have chain of ward on as many pieces as you can. This is the featherweight is gonna help give me more protection. As you can see down here, I got a 1,161 physical and elemental protection compared to the main dungeon, which is 878 physical and elemental. But through the main dungeon, you shouldn't need as much, and also you want to do more damage throughout the main dungeon. The boss fights, you might need a little bit more protection. So you're not going to do as much DPS because you don't have the attuned leather pants, but you get a little bit more protection. It's really about attrition and taking out the little things that spawn on the ground. I can't think of the words right now. And so that's what you want to do. So always have 2 sets for a lot of these dungeons. So let's say Starstone, it's all void, so you don't need 2 sets. You'll be just fine. You'll just need your Lost Ward pod, maybe a Strike amulet for the first boss. And that's about it. And I'm speaking mainly, of course, as DPS. And in a Ned, you could basically just go fire throughout, because both boss fights, well, the corrupted boss fights would be void. So you would need a second set, which would be void. And if you could go a lot of thrust conditioning and chain of ward, that'd be good, because it does a lot of thrust. The boss does, and so do the enemies with their spears. But you can't really max out in void because you're going to have the dots on your back. But fire protection amulet will be enough to ward off all the fire from the arrows falling down. So it should be pretty easy, but you still need 2 sets for that if you want to be fully protected in that corruption boss fight. Now, make sure that you have your trophies up and that they are active. Make sure that you change them out to the appropriate dungeon that you're running. Don't forget to change them if you switch dungeons. And make sure your skill tree is correct on whatever weapon you may be running, whether it be spear, or I'm trying some things out with the spear this week, so it's a little bit weird right now, or the great sword. Make sure your stuff's selected how it should be and ranked up. Your hatchet, if you're going to be ranged with the hatchet, I love this setup a lot, because you can start really throwing those hatchets pretty quickly and do more damage with Berserk. So let's see, what else would I talk about here? Make sure you attribute correctly. You know, a lot of times, you know, people are signing up with 500 strength with a hammer and great axe. You'll never get accepted into an M3 doing that. Those are both support weapons. Know the difference between the support weapons and main DPS weapons. And if you need to look and have a reference, you can look back at my last video about that. And the last thing I want to go over is if you get ready to sign up for an M3, this will save you a big headache. Let's say I'm getting ready to sign up for this one, right? If I go right here and I click, like I want to request a join, and it doesn't say link right here, I want you to go ahead and link your gear anyways to the person. So you would direct message, right? Just press escape, escape, escape. Press tab. You can hold down alt, and you could easily just hold down alt, click 5 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can press enter, and then you do the next 5 by holding down alt and left clicking, and then you can send all your stuff really quickly that way. If the person says, oh, don't worry, it's, you know, not that big of a deal, back out of that lobby because you're about to just get smashed and it's going to cause you a headache. Okay. If people aren't checking gear when you go into these things, you're going to have a bad run 99% of the time. So you need to make sure that they're going to be checking gear. If not, start your own lobby and check people's gear. Check for enchanted ward, check for, you know, make sure they have, if they have a thrust weapon, they have thrust ring, you know, and unless it's like Serenity, because a lot of times with Serenity I run a spear and I'll have a thrust ring because Serenity even power caps, so you don't need slash damage for it. Knowing all that kind of stuff will help, but you need to make sure they have at least Chain of Ward on a couple pieces and that the gear and the stats all match up and they look like they know what they're doing. You don't have to be overly picky, but I would say be pretty picky. Hopefully more people see this video and they kind of get an idea. I rushed through it pretty quickly. If you need me to go more in depth on certain things or certain roles, I know I went mostly over DPS. I do also tank. Then go ahead and leave it in the comments and I'll do that for you, tanks. If you need. Tanks should be pretty simple. Basically just go 300 con, 300 strength. And, you know, have 2 sets also. And just accordingly, strike protection for the tanks and Savage Divide, because both those bosses do a lot of strike. So that about wraps it up. I appreciate you stopping by and taking your time out and watching the video. I do appreciate it, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Good luck out there.